Welcome to the Mental Militia, uniting minds and freeing souls from the bonds of mental slavery and ruling class manipulation.
Okay, moving along, we got video number 3. I want to get into trust law a little bit more. Like I said, we're going to be getting into trust law a lot over and over and over and over and over because it's so basic and there's really not a whole lot to know about it, but it's just total freedom. I mean, you can rip yourself out of every single statute that exists literally on the entire planet to the point where you're standing there and the only body of law that really has anything to do with you at all is common law. And it's wild, man. And then once you understand trust law and you understand the maxims of trust law and you understand the Bible verses that comes from, all bodies of law stem from the 10 maxims of trust law and the maxims of trust law. We're going to get into those maxims later. Let's go into the tiers real quick. So the top tier is trust law. And then below that, I would say contract law or definitions of a contract or what makes a contract, which we're going to get into in a much, much later video. And then below that, you basically have the UCC. And then below that, you have basically everything else to some degree. Because the UCC is the Uniform Commercial Code and all commercial activity is a contract. But this is kind of the generalized idea, right? So all of contract law is based off of trust law. And then all the UCC is based off of trust law and the contract law. And when I say contract law, what that means is the basic ideas of the definitions of and the basic rules of contracts. We're going to get into the basic skeleton elements that build those more complicated codes. So you don't have to go through all these codes and try to learn all these things. And I'm going to teach you the basic skeletal elements so that you're 10,000 times beyond any lawyer, because lawyers don't even look at, they're below statute. The lowest rung of the ladder of understanding is procedure, which is where 99% of lawyers and attorneys are at. And then above that, you have statute. And then above that, you have law. And then above that, you have, these basic ideas like contracts, how a contract's built, what are the laws, what are the rules, and then trust law, the maxims of trust law, the maxims of commercial law. This is like the tippy top of the food chain. And you're going to be able to basically present, not represent, you're going to be able to present yourself in a court of law, which is the way it's supposed to be. That's how law is supposed to be, right? Okay. And I know that sounds crazy, but we'll get there slowly but surely, okay? The next thing I want to go over is trust law. Again, all of life is a series of trust law actions. Every single thing that you do every single day, all day long, is a series of trust actions, okay? Now, in the Bible, God talks about how, man was created in his image, okay? So we're going to get into that a little bit too, right? And even if you're not religious, I'm not even a Christian. This is just the way it is. I mean, if you're not a religious person, if you don't like religion, fine. I mean, this is, the Word of God and religion are two very different things. I know in a lot of people's minds it might not be, but again, I don't go to church. I have nothing to do with, I'm actually a Scientologist, so I do go to that church a lot. But Christianity, Lutheranism, all that kind of stuff, I don't go. I haven't gone since I was 12 years old. Whether you like it or not, all of law comes from the Bible. And when you study the Word of God and you study how it relates to trust law, it's actually really, really cool and fascinating. And it frees you from everything, man. You learn this everything, every bill, every credit card bill, every mortgage, every ticket, every arrestable offense, unless you hurt somebody or damage their property or break common law. So trust law is like this. You have the asset or the cash, right? Then you have the trustee. Then you have the beneficiary. And then you kind of basically have God essentially here, right? And he actually owns whatever's in here, right? So what that means is like, let's say, for example, you owe tax debt to the IRS or something like that, right? The beneficiary doesn't own what's in the trust, and neither does the trustee. So if the IRS comes after you, you don't own this, so they can't really take it, right? God owns it. So it's very interesting. This has a lot to do with asset protection, which we're going to get into much, much later in the free course. Every single thing that you do in your entire life, if you think of it as a trust action, your life is going to get a lot better very, very, very fast. If you are trying to do a business deal, if you are selling something, if you are fixing something, if you are talking to somebody, if you are buying a meal, if you are purchasing a new cell phone, if you are saying hello to someone that you just met, if you are meeting a new social interaction, if you're meeting a new business interaction, if you're having a drink with a friend, if I could just go on and on. Every single action is a trust action. I'm going to explain how that is and why. What happens is, as the trustee, your responsibility is to benefit the beneficiary, right? When you're selling, and the reason why people don't like salespeople, especially car salespeople and stuff like that, is because they do what's called a reverse trust scam. Reverse trust scam is basically when they flip the trust on you, right? So they pretend that they're the beneficiary and that you're the trustee. Cops do this too. Now, my brother's a cop, so to any cops listening to this or watching this or whatever, like, I have no bad beef with you. We just need to do a better job as denizens, which is not citizens, or sojourns. Sojourn means somebody who basically traveling and they're temporarily living in a location. That's actually the best word to use when you describe your citizenship status. The term means something more than traveling and applies to a temporary as contradistinguished from a permanent residence. A sojourn of California is basically where I'm at. You're the trustee when you're selling somebody something. So your job as the trustee is to benefit the beneficiary. You benefit the beneficiary through education, through information, through answering their questions, through hooking them up with people that they might know or need to know by, referring them elsewhere if your product is not the right product for them, etc. The reverse trust scam is you're trying to force them into something they don't need. You're trying to push something on them. You're trying to get them into something that is not the best thing for them. You're not benefiting the beneficiary. And the way it works is technically that's trust fraud. Even in life, that's trust fraud. Because when you realize that trust law is behind every single thing, every single action, every single object in all of existence. So every time you break the trustee-beneficiary relationship at any single point in time, that explains why your life is so fucked up, to be totally honest. This is a total side note. I mean, this piece of information right here can turn your entire life from a steaming pile of shit into literally a complete utopia to get everything you've ever wanted from every single aspect of your entire life. You are able to clean up your whole life with this information. I mean, let's say you're in a relationship with a girl, right? And you're trying to, and you hear this a lot, like in the pickup community and stuff like that. So what's happening in a neediness situation, whether it be, a dating situation, a sexual situation, or a sales situation, or anything, again, is you have a person who's the trustee and they're trying to do a reverse trust scam, which is trust fraud, which is a felony. They're trying to be the beneficiary and they're trying to make the other person the trustee. So for example, you hear about it a lot, the nice guy, which is in my book, which I have a couple of my books over here. You can see it in the video. Love is a Battery, little plug for my book. But it ties into trust law because everything ties into trust law. Even my first book ties into trust law. I just didn't know it at the time. You see some hot girl and you're going on a date with her and you're a piece of shit and you basically say, hey, I paid for dinner. Like, I want to get fucked, So what you're doing is you're saying, I'm the beneficiary now, bitch, and you need to be the trustee because I was the trustee earlier and I made you the beneficiary earlier, right? That is a felony. That's trust fraud. You're not going to get prosecuted for it necessarily. But basically, like all of commerce law, all of statute, everything you're ever going to learn, the UCC, the United States Code, everything is basically based off of that same idea. Again, trust law is this is the tippy top. And when you philosophically understand what I'm describing to you right now and you totally get it, bro, you're either the trustee or you're the beneficiary at all times. And if you try to swap those, girls to run away from you, it's going to cause sales prospects to run away from you. It's going to cause the whole world to run away from you. Your family, your friends, everything that you love, everything that you adore will exit your life, whether you like it or not. And a lot of times it will exit your life unexplainably, and you won't know why. And you'll start to, list in your head, what could it be? And coming up with all these ideas. And what happens is when you start listing in your head like that, and you start making lists of what could this be that's destroying my life, and oh my God, and oh my God, and oh my God, you can actually literally drive yourself into the deepest depression, drug use, alcohol use, frantic sexual behavior, etc. It will drive you literally insane. When you understand trust law, then none of that is confusing anymore, and none of that will cause a problem for you anymore. You're the trustee, and then they become the trustee, and then they benefit you. But either party, God didn't design this to be something where someone's forced to be the trustee or forced to be the beneficiary. The power of choice and the ability for the person to decide or not decide or to leave or to do whatever they want at any point in time, that's built into trust law. It's the willingness of the individual to be the trustee and the willingness of the individual to be the beneficiary. So some people don't want to be beneficiaries of certain things, and some people don't want to be trustees of certain things. And you're going to learn later on in contract law that there's all these different points for a contract to be there. One of the points of a contract that has to be there legally is that the person has to be of sound mind. They have to understand what they're agreeing to, and they have to understand the terms and conditions fully and clearly in order to be a trustee and take on their position as a trustee. So when you do things and you're secretive and you're clever and you're a fucking little piece of shit, when you try to trick someone into a reverse trust scam to be the beneficiary or to be the trustee so you can be the beneficiary, you're violating trust law, God's law. You're violating contract law. You're violating commerce law. And you wake up with no friends, no money, maybe in jail, or drug addiction. And that's why. So trust law and what we're going over here goes so far beyond just changing your status and becoming free of contracts and statuses, which is contracts and statutes, which is what this whole course is all about. This is literally the core aspect of sanity and success itself. Let's move on to the next thing. We're going to get into jurisdiction next. So jurisdiction is extremely, extremely important. It's different than trust law and contract law. It's below those points on the totem pole because trust law and contract law are everything and everything. Jurisdiction has to do with when you go a little bit lower on the totem pole and you start getting into like different statutes and stuff. What statutes apply to a certain person? Like, is the person inside this body of statutes or not? We're going to get into a couple things when it comes to jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is extremely, extremely important. It's not as important as trust law and contract law, but it's up there, man. It's way, way up there. It's definitely a lot higher on the scale than statute, and it's way, way higher on the scale than procedure, which is just bullshit. Let's get into jurisdiction. So there's 3 primary jurisdictions on Earth, okay? So we have the air, the land, and then we have the sea. These are the 3 primary jurisdictions. And when you say the word jurisdiction, it could mean a lot more than this. Like, this is like the top tier, and then it breaks down from there, and then you have like statutes, and then you have like, is the person, let's say a particular county has particular rules, or a particular city has particular rules, or a particular state has particular rules, or different types of tax authorities have particular rules, and you have all these different bodies of rules. Does the county have jurisdiction? Does the city have jurisdiction? Does the state have jurisdiction over, basically, do they have the ability to push their rule set, their statutes onto somebody else, onto this particular person for this particular reason? That's jurisdiction, right? So air is the senior most jurisdiction by far, which is, you guessed it, it's trust law. And trust law comes from the Bible. So the Bible is the tippy top of all this. And then from there you get trust law, which is the air jurisdiction, okay? Then you have land. This is where you are as a human being. This is human law, otherwise known as common law. This is the 3 rules I was telling you before. Rule number 1 is don't hurt people. Rule number 2 is don't hurt people's property or steal their shit. Rule number 3 is be transparent in your contracts. Don't f people over with your contracts or lie or be untransparent with your contracts. That's rule number 3. Then you have the C. The C is where things get complicated. This is commerce law. This is the UCC, the USC, the United States Code. This is pretty much everything. Now, what, again, we've gone over this a couple times. We're going to go over it again. What is, in all of commerce, what is the senior thing in all of commerce? Contracts. Contracts is the senior aspect to all commerce. So when you understand contracts, you understand commerce law, and you don't really, I mean, you can go into all the statutes and you can go into the UCC and you can fuck around for 9 billion years going through all this horse shit. But really, truthfully, when you study the basic element of contracts, you pretty much are studying the entire body of the C jurisdiction, which is the commerce jurisdiction. So that's kind of why I'm talking so much about commerce and trust law and common law. We're trying to simplify all of law here. And the reason why we're trying to simplify all of law is because once you really simplify all of law, you can find and kill every single contract that you're involved with, and you can pull yourself out of every single statute, right? And that's what we're trying to do with this course. So human law, common law has the 3 rules. Super simple. Trust law, you have the trustee, the beneficiary, and the asset or the cash in the middle, and then you have the God that owns it, and then you have a bunch of other shit that you can go and study about trust, like the person who creates the trust has a certain name, and then you have, like, if the beneficiaries die or something happens, then the trusts go to a different person. That's called the successor. There are other things, but it's like the importance level of those other things for this course are like 0, so we're not getting into that. Just the trustee beneficiary relationship inside of trust law is basically like, we're just going to keep banging on that thing over and over again, because once you really get that, a lot of magic's going to start happening. And then in the C, you have contracts, contract law. Once you understand the basics of that, which is going to be in a far later video, but we're going to be going over bits and pieces of it leading all the way up to that video. So that way when we hit that video, you can really nail it down. Let's say, for example, you go into a courtroom, right? You challenge jurisdiction, which we're going to get into later on. You're basically saying, you know, what rules or laws or contract are you basing the fact off of that I have to follow this particular rule set, right? So like you get pulled over on the freeway and you ask the officer who's giving you a ticket, you say, what contract or what particular connection do I have into what body of law or statute that gives you the authority to write me a ticket? Or a judge, like what authority do you have, or what contract do I have, or what aspect of my life do you know, or that factually gives you the right of authority to judge me in my life and what I'm doing in the rule set? That is what jurisdiction means, and that is what jurisdiction is, okay? So jurisdiction is horrifically important, because once you understand the different jurisdictions, which we're going to get into later, and once you understand how to deal with them, especially these 3, which you pretty much already have it down, it's really not all that complicated. Again, we'll go over it again. Why not? Jurisdiction of the heir, which is the senior jurisdiction, is trust law, which is the trustee-beneficiary relationship. That's it. That's it. Land, which is where humans are. They don't realize it. In law, they're not. All humans are in this category, and they don't realize it, and we're going to get into how to fix that. This is where you want to be. You want to be here and here. You really want to be in all 3 at the same time, but really this and this is where you start getting all your rights back, and you start pulling out of all the statutes, okay? And we're going to go over all that. It's really not even that complicated. The land, human law, common law, you know, the 3 rules. You have rule number 1, don't hurt people. Rule number 2, don't steal or damage their property. And rule number 3, be transparent in your contracts. Don't f people over in their contracts. Jurisdiction number 3, which is the C. It's commerce, and it's the UCC and the United States Code, and basically everything under the sun, moon, and stars that you've ever seen that's confusing. And the God of that area is contracts and contracts law and the structure of a contract and what it means to have a contract. So those are the 3 jurisdictions. Those are the 3 things that we're going to be going over in this course, so you can handle and control all 3 jurisdictions in your life. Okay? Next thing. This is your all caps name. All caps name is a trust. All caps name is a vessel. All caps name is a slave. All caps name is a U.S. citizen, which is something that is basically owned by United States, which means the District of Columbia. This name is basically your slave name, and when you respond to your slave name, you thus become a slave. If they assume you're a slave and you say, yes, I am, and you pay, or you sign documentation that agrees with such a thing, and you do not sign that documentation under threat, menace, or duress, you have just made yourself a slave. Congratulations. And that's exactly how the system works. They do not force you to be a slave. They do not make you a slave. They just have some very, very cleverly worded terms that you think mean one thing, but that don't have anything to do with that at all whatsoever. You assume the definitions of words, which is absolutely deadly. You sign documentation that state that you are a certain status, and they go, oh, well, look at that. One more slave for the pile, boys. Boy, that's beautiful. Look at that. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for being our slave. We really appreciate that. Quite friendly of you. Thank you so much. When you sign documentation, when you respond to your name in all capital letters, when you allow them to create this assumption, you are basically pulling yourself into the jurisdiction of United States, which means the District of Columbia. So this is how it works. That's America. It's the shittiest drawing of America ever drawn. Let's see, a f***ed up tooth or something. So here's DC. So I live here. I live in Los Angeles. When I respond to this, or when I sign documentation stating that this is true or that I'm a U.S. citizen, in law, I don't live here or reside here or sojourn here or anything. I actually just moved to Washington, D.C., otherwise known as the District of Columbia, which is a private, for-profit federal corporation known as United States, with a capital U and a capital S, which we went over before. The all caps name is the thing that places you inside their little sandbox that they have, their little world, their little plaything called the District of Columbia. And once you're in there, you now are their little bitch. You have privileged income. You are taxed. You don't have any rights as a human being at all because you don't live in the United States of America. The Constitution, which I have right here on the video, that's a cool, like, old style version of it with like the old paper and shit, really cool paper. The Constitution does not apply to a federal corporation that is a completely foreign entity to the United States of America. It applies to people who live in the United States of America. The Bill of Rights applies to people in the United States of America. The Second Amendment applies to the United States of America. It doesn't apply to United States. It doesn't apply to a federal corporation. It doesn't apply to for-profit corporations. It doesn't apply to any of those things. So this is the huge, monstrous confusion that people have gotten themselves into. And this is the huge, monstrous confusion that we're going to clean up in this course fully. And we're just starting to get into that now. We're going to be getting into that more and more and more. And then what do you do, obviously, later? That's the last part. We're not going to do anything until you're understanding this 100%, very, very comfortable with it. And then we'll do some shit to fix it. So your all capital letter name, you can actually trademark that name. And that's one of the ways you can gain control over it. That name actually has a section of the public debt that it's responsible for. You can discharge that public debt, and you can transform that name, which is a trust, you can transform that name, that trust, into a creditor of the United States rather than a debtor. But really, the first and most important thing and the simplest thing you need to do is just stop responding to it and to clarify it and to make sure that you're not responding to it and saying that you're a U.S. citizen and placing yourself in the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia and burning all your rights to the ground. You're burning all your rights to the ground when you do that. Every time you sign anything that says U.S. citizen on it or U.S. person, when you go to the bank and you sign documentation that says U.S. person, it means the same thing. We're going to get into all those terms in the next video, I believe, or very, very soon. There's not that many of them, and they're very simple to understand. Very, very difficult to find clear definitions for each one. So this course is going to be very valuable for that. The all caps name is what pulls you into their jurisdiction. So how do you write a human name Normally. I do mine in all lowercase. Some people do not. Some people do the first letter capital and the rest lowercase. I don't really see any problem with either one. I prefer all lowercase. So all lowercase, we have Brandon, Brandon, hyphen or line, middle line, Joe, lowercase, colon, Williams. Now even better than that, you would say Brandon, I do all lowercase, hyphen, Joe, lowercase, colon, family of Williams. A last name is a vessel name. A family name is a human name. So this is a family name. First name Brandon, family name Williams. This is how you write a human name. Now, if you want to go even farther, now what happens is that, let's say you write this name on a document, just like everyone always does, because this world's fucked up, they want to try to flip the trust on you. They want to do a reverse trust scan. They want to make you the trustee and then the beneficiary, right? So let's say, for example, you're signing documentation at a bank. You can sign using the human name, and then what you do is you do a comma and you do title. So what is your title? Are you the trustee? Are you the beneficiary? There's other words too, like agent. Agent means that you're working on behalf of someone else, right? When you write comma and then title like this, you basically make it so that they can't assume your title or flip your title or change your title as they see fit. It was never specified. We didn't know that you were the beneficiary. We thought you were the trustee and we're the beneficiaries. That's what banks do. That's how they charge you fees and all the good stuff, right? So then you write beneficiary at the end. Now you're locked in. Now they can't flip the trust on you. They can't make you the trustee because you signed as the beneficiary. You're locked in as beneficiary. I mean, obviously, like at that point, now you can't act as a trustee at any point in time. So you just have to really understand what you're doing. Most of the time, with most interactions with companies and businesses and credit card applications and stuff like that, you're the beneficiary. You're not the trustee. When you're selling something or you're working for somebody or you have clients and stuff like that, like those are all trustee type behaviors and actions, right? But beneficiary is basically anything that where you're paying for something to have a service done for you, you're the beneficiary. So you're the beneficiary of a bank account, you're the beneficiary of when you're buying a car, you're the beneficiary when you're buying a sandwich, you're the beneficiary when you are reading a book. The book writer is the trustee and the reader is the beneficiary. When whoever made this drink is the trustee, and when I'm drinking it, I'm the beneficiary. So I'm benefiting from what the trustee has given to me, right? No matter what you think of, no matter what you're trying to look at or analyze, it always, 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 always comes down to fucking trust law. And it always comes down to the trustee-beneficiary relationship. And if you can't explain it in trustee-beneficiary language, then you don't understand what's going on. Like there's something that you're missing in the interaction. Always trustee-beneficiary. So if a person's getting shot, you can pretty much guarantee that they are the beneficiary somehow. Somehow. This is God's law. This is the way the world works. And this gets into, obviously like that of which you decide becomes reality. And this gets into, if you weren't there in the first place, it would have never happened and your decisions, equal where you're at. And this gets into fate and this gets into all sorts of things. But a decision to do something is senior to trust law in a way because you're deciding that something's going to happen and then you wind up in some sort of trustee beneficiary relationship that is the realization of the decision that you had made or the thing that you had decided. So decisions and power of choice is senior even to trust law in a way. At that point, you're going outside of law entirely and you're going into like the fucking ether of spirituality. Like that's the ceiling of law right there. Right here is trust law and that whole idea. And then right above that, outside of law pretty much, because law by definition means like, a delineated system that breaks things down into like almost like a science. So when you start getting above the science aspect of it, you're now outside of law. So anything above that ceiling, power of choice, decisions, how a person got there to begin with, guilt, shame, all this kind of stuff. This is above law. And really law can't really do anything with that or comprehend that. It's too esoteric. It's too above the law. So in this course, we're going to try to stay away from that. We don't really need to get into that too much. So, all right. So that's all for video number 3. I will see you guys at video number 4. Goodbye.